Following Eugenia's worrying live stream, I have just seen so much dark speculation online, and I think there's some things that should be said and some things that should not be said. Anyone who has ever had a single thing to do with mental health services, seemingly in any country around the world, you know it is not a fairy story like that. However you may feel about the potential loss of someone you've watched drifting through the tempestuous goldfish bowl of fame for over a decade now, you aren't the one staring down the possibility of losing everything. Everything you've ever been and everything you could, in a different world, have been. So hello, you wonderful citizen of cyberspace, and welcome to a video about the worst possible outcome of an ED and the potential legal aftermath if you lose someone to this disease. I've really gone back and forward on whether to make this video at all, honestly, because it does feel morbid. But I have just seen so much dark speculation online following Eugenia's worrying live stream. And often that speculation has been right in the comment section, which I cannot imagine is helpful or pleasant for her. And I just wanted to say some stuff, because it seems like the whole internet can see this person slipping away from us. And I think there's some things that should be said and some things that should not be said, particularly not directly in the comment sections of that person. Obviously, I'm every bit as human as everyone else and every bit as prone to bleak speculation. There's so much on my mind about what's going on right now, but I just don't think this is the time or the place for the majority of the thoughts, theories, and concerns that I personally have. So I just want to keep it to this one specific rumour and generalise things as much as possible around the basic issue of, would there be a vast legal inquiry into the family of any ED'd person should they pass away from starvation at their family home? Because that seems to be the rumour that is going around a lot, that there's going to be a legal inquest. There's going to be a legal inquest. If something happens to Eugenia, it's going to get legal. And that's what I want to talk about. I should preface this by clarifying that I am neither a legal genius nor a doctor. I am just someone who has lost several friends to severe long-running EDs, and this is what I have seen happen afterwards. Before we start, I do obviously need to give you a mild ED trigger warning. There's nothing explicit. It's just, obviously, this is an incredibly tragic and upsetting situation all round, so please exit here if you need to. If you're up to continuing, though, here we go. When it comes to this rumour that their family might get hauled up before the law, suspected of abuse or neglect, I really don't know where people are getting this from, besides the wishful thinking of relentless online theories. And I think I have to press home here regarding the name that's on everyone's lips, that while there may be some evidence in multiple directions relating to their home life, we are talking about an ED'd person who none of us have ever met, and more than that, who has always been infamously tight-lipped about their condition, their past traumas, their family life, all of it. Nothing is factually known. Thus, any alleged abuse is, at this point, purely internet speculation. So I really have no interest in getting into the endlessly worn, threadbare details here regarding all the things that people are now upholding as alleged evidence of abuse, because that is all widely discussed and it's easy to find online if you're interested. So what I want to give you is some information to perhaps drag the debate into more balanced waters. And whatever you ultimately come out thinking about the whole situation, you should always consider every side of an issue before jumping aboard a bandwagon, because the most tempting bandwagons are the salacious negative ones, not the rational explanations. No one likes those, but I think they need considering. And for myself, regarding all of this, I'm still pretty neutral. Like, I don't know what's going on because I don't know these people or the facts, and both sides of the coin are, to my mind, equally plausible. I have known severely ED'd people who were ill-treated by their families, but I've known others with equally severe EDs who had very normal, even supportive home lives. All of them had trauma, but not all trauma is going to originate from the same place. And to spread some just basic ED awareness, when it comes to the thing that is repeated so often about this person, severely disordered adults who are still living in the family home and perhaps have a limited sphere of relationship experience, jobs, and life experience generally, this is not necessarily evidence for an abuse allegation. It doesn't necessarily mean that they're being locked in the house and held hostage and all of this stuff. It isn't even a wild card, an unusual thing to be living at home into your 30s and well beyond and being long-term single. It's basically to be expected when you're talking about an ED that is that long-term and that severe. EDs do strip a person tragically of their adult motivations and normal thought processes. Romantic desire gets starved away, along with the desire for so many other things. You are so hyper-focused on your disorder and on food and on weight, and it becomes this wall of numbers that you block out everything else with, and that can be very comforting. But in doing so, of course, you block out the whole world and you block out life experience as time goes by. Romantic desire gets starved away, thus relationships are short-lived or entirely absent. And a huge part of being ED'd is the fear of growing up and an inability to handle the pressures of the normal adult world. EDs frequently represent a desire to return to the simpler realm of childhood, in shrinking yourself. It could be your body growing up and going through puberty and the adult attention that you're then going to receive for being in that body. That can be a factor. It can just be mentally, you want to be small and safe and a child again. That there are so many things like that. And it is very common for ED'd people to cling to childlike things, be that a bubblegum pink bedroom, cartoon characters, Disney films, plushies, or a dress sense that seems to belong to someone far younger than they are. And I realize all these sound like very specific examples, but literally all these things are ED'd tropes. Even speaking for myself, when I started out on YouTube in my late 20s, I was in a bubblegum pink room with stenciled flowers and sparkles everywhere that looked like a 5-year-old girl who wanted to be a princess dwelled there, when in fact I decorated it that way by myself, for myself, just a few years prior during a really terrible year when it did just feel more comforting to kind of retreat back to childhood. And these things do tend to become particularly pronounced at lower weights, when the disease is severely impacting that person's adult hormones, mood, and mental state. So even if an ED'd person has the financial means to go and live alone somewhere, it is very normal for them to remain living at home instead, because they may simply lack the mental and emotional resilience and capability, maybe even the physical strength, to survive living in isolation and doing everything independently for themselves. The main thing in my experience that tends to make an ED'd person move out of their family home is with parents who constantly interfere in their disordered behaviours. They will move out in order to attain more freedom, and once there, they often sink even deeper into their secret web of self-destruction and get even sicker. Moving out, therefore, is not a guarantee of recovery or even improvement. Like, it can go either way. And if someone lives in a large house and with parents who are either very permissive and don't get up in their business regarding the ED, or parents who perhaps at the start of the ED may have tried like hell to intervene, but ultimately failed to the degree that they now realise resistance is futile, and giving their ED'd relative their unconditional presence and love when needed is the best thing they can realistically do. I'm not saying these are necessarily what's going on. I'm just saying these are a bunch of situations that can be what's going on behind the scenes of someone who is an ED'd adult still living at home. And it's not necessarily like this toxic thing. You have to consider all the avenues of possibility. In these situations, the ED'd person is likely to feel comfortable staying at home and comforted in having the trinkets and surroundings of their childhood bedroom still around them. Now, I don't deny that in some cases where there is toxicity in the home or some kind of codependent toxic relationship between them and their parents, it probably would be healthier for them to make a clean break in fresh surroundings. But sadly, a severe lifelong ED is a monster of a thing. And just like any chronic illness, it is obviously going to impact a person's independence. So the sneering and jeering online about a severely sick person's failure to independently thrive in adulthood needs to stop. It's nothing more than mocking a disability at this point, rubbing salt in the wound of so much missed happiness and life experience. And aside from how completely cruel that is, it demonstrates the sort of conspiracist anti-logic that could not critically think its way out of a paper bag. Like, it blows my mind the amount of comments I have seen recently from people who just cannot critically think, that in the same breath they will bang on about how visibly sick this person is, how they shouldn't be on the internet, how they're very triggering, and then they will, in the same comment, go on to mock them for not living independently and for not having this whole independent life that they feel they should have had. And it's like, do you not see the obvious paradox in your own words that these things are vitally intertwined? Being very sick is going to impact your quality of life and your independence. Should not be hard to understand and to grasp and to stop doing, because it's cruel. And it's not, even if you hate this person, and they are a flawed person for sure, but you have to think that you're not just talking to or about them when you're mocking this kind of stuff. There are plenty of other people with EDs and other mental illnesses who are in exactly the same basket when it comes to their lack of freedom and independence, and they're reading that and they're feeling mocked and belittled too. You just have to think a bit, So please, before picking up and running with any element of internet speculation ever about anyone, just pause and think and maybe Google a few things if you realise there are gaps in your knowledge before you run your mouth, And I do think the elephant in the room needs addressing at this point. While many of us have been through an ED to some extent, there is a profound difference between having suffered for a handful of years in your teens to early 20s and perhaps relapse briefly now and then, the way I have, and like the majority of ED sufferers will have done, versus having gotten sick and never managed to break free, to the extent that it takes your entire adulthood and all of your adult freedoms from you, and is now bordering on taking your life altogether. In general, I do feel it helps nobody to compare and compete sicknesses, because all EDs are valid and all of them, however brief, cause immense suffering. But unfortunately, at this point, someone has got to come out and say it. A 5-year ED versus a 15-year plus continual ED is comparing apples and oranges. I've got friends who are still in that latter category, and I have had to accept that I can no longer relate to or truly empathise with or often give helpful advice to in any way the experiences they now suffer, like the severity of their health complications, the intense frustration, disappointment, and at times hopelessness that they feel within themselves about the life they've missed out on, and the experience of being hospitalized alongside teenagers who will either idolize them as some sick paragon of self-control, or who look at them in fear and pity, still being so stuck in their 30s, 40s or above. And then, of course, there's the whole online world of people who think they can relate when in truth they absolutely, at this point, cannot. And I fully include myself in that. Yes, I've had an ED, and yes, I've walked parallel paths with long-term addictions and mental illness, But the severe and enduring ED world is a specific thing I have never been a part of, thus can never wholly grasp. My head is starting to explode a little bit with every comment I see, stating things about this person and their ED that are transparently unlikely, then accrediting them with, I went through this too when I was younger, so I know. We don't know. I don't bloody know. Frankly, when you combine such a lengthy and severe ED with a specific person's globally infamous ED status, bear in mind we are talking about a wholly unique case. No one else on earth at the present time is in their situation, and I would actually argue that no one else on earth has ever been in this person's situation. Like, yes, you can throw out names like Karen Carpenter, Lena Zavaroni, etc., but they were before the internet. They were not having to go live on pretty much the daily, confronted with floodgates of people talking directly to you and throwing hate and concern and strangeness at you directly and fetishy things. It's a very, very, very unique situation. Therefore, none of us at this point can do more than wildly guess how their life must be. I know we live in these times of bottomless curiosity where everyone's life history is Googleable, until people have begun to feel almost entitled to every bit of a person's world. But we are not. What you share and how much is an individual choice. Like, even if you put yourself out there as an influencer, everyone has their own boundaries about what they talk about, and everyone is entitled to some private patches of their soul. I think you need that to stay any modicum of sane doing this as a career. And for my part, honestly, I suspect that we will never truly know all the things the internet is churning and bubbling with speculation about right now. Like, I do not think anyone in the close family circle is going to come out and do a great big tell-all about everything. I just don't think it's going to happen. Which brings us to the real subject of this video. The suspicions that if an ED'd person wastes away completely in their family home, that family will then be under investigation for all sorts of presumed crimes. Now, having lost a number of friends to their EDs, I have to say there has never, ever, to my knowledge, been a legal investigation of the family left behind. And in the case of the friend that I lost who was the closest to me, I don't recall whether there was even an investigatory post-mortem, given she had been in ED treatment, largely outpatient, for decades, and her declining health was thoroughly documented in her medical notes. The condition of her body was visibly shocking, and as horrible as it is to say this, I doubt her passing was in any way a surprise to anyone medically involved with her. Like, it's been a decade now. I don't remember if there was even an investigative post-mortem, because while that is quite normal in young people passing away, when the cause of their passing away is very well known and the medical doctors, that they've seen it coming, I don't know whether they even do that. But as I say, it's a decade ago and it's a bit of a blur. But there was absolutely no legal inquiry into the family. There was no thought of legally, should you have done more? Should you have forced hospitalized them? There was none of that. It was a tragedy that no one could stop and nothing more, and it was left at that. So when it comes to all of these elements relating to that friend, people had tried to have her forcibly hospitalized, but involuntarily committing someone with a long-term ED is a really complex and morally murky situation, way more so than if you were dealing with a young person who's brand new to their disorder. When a person has been forced into treatment before and it has failed or even exacerbated the situation, it is quite likely going to be seen as an unlikely route of future success, and honestly one that may simply lead to unnecessary suffering on the ED'd person's part. Like, just in the same way that some hospitals will provide beer and even vodka to alcoholics who are inpatient, because there is no point forcing the hellishness and physical danger of withdrawal on someone who will only start drinking again the second they're released. The same goes for long-term EDs. Physical recovery from a very low weight can be extremely perilous, not uncommon for someone in that condition to have their health crash out even more once they start eating compared to when they were keeping things constant, which is definitely not to say ever that recovery shouldn't be attempted or isn't possible if monitored really carefully in a medical setting. It's just to say that it can be kind of ill-advised to do all of that to a person if they are deeply entrenched in the dark rabbit hole of their ED and you know that they will just relapse straight back the second you release them. If an intervention is undoubtedly doomed, it is quite likely to just endanger their already fragile health and potentially traumatize them with weight gain, often their greatest fear that they were not ready or prepared for. And dude, I know this sucks. I know we would all love to think that the mental health services anywhere could perform some sort of angelic intervention, not just relating to this person, but relating to everyone we know who is suffering with some sort of mental health issue. It would be gorgeous to think that mental health services could swoop in and put the pieces of someone back together again like a fairy tale. But anyone who has ever had a single thing to do with mental health services, seemingly in any country around the world, you know it is not a fairy story like that. And EDs and addictions, because they really are much the same thing, are incredibly complex diseases. EDs and addictions can be incurable, to the extent that an ED can be considered terminal. I'm going to link a detailed but very readable and very interesting research report on terminal EDs in the drop-down box if you'd like to learn after this how some people's stories tragically ended when they were given medically assisted dying for their ultimately deemed terminal ED. Because that is how serious and long-term and ultimately irreversible some people's conditions can become. Like, you know, we all know this kind of buzz statistic about EDs being the most deadly psychiatric illnesses. And I think that gets said so often that the words lose all meaning and you forget that there are people losing their lives behind that statement. All those numbers, they are all people who tried and failed and were dragged through this system and that system and hoped and failed some more and ultimately lost the battle. And dragging these people back to hospital time and time again against their will to be refed and kept alive just for another round of torturous starvation, then more unwanted refeeding. It will work for some people and it will save them, but for others it becomes nothing more than a revolving door of suffering. And when the person is likely to resort to potentially unaliving themselves over this situation, or their body is slowly, agonizingly giving out regardless of all intervention, sometimes the only thing anyone can do, guttingly, is to let the person have the space and free will to experience their final days with some modicum of independence. And this flashes me back to the friend I lost a decade ago. That, people did try to force hospitalize her, and she was deemed to be, in a sound state of mind. She had a long history of this ED, and it was clear that dragging her off to a general psych ward and feeding her up was not going long-term to help. So they let her be, and yes, she lost her life, but the final pictures I ever saw of her, she was sunbathing on her patio with a cocktail in her hand, smiling. And that is kind of comforting. That although I lost her, I doubt she was happy. I doubt she was happy in her final days, but I think she was happier than she would have been tortured with another round of treatment that ultimately wouldn't have helped. Sometimes you have just got to let people live out their time with a bit of free will and free choice. And that is horrible to have to accept, let alone watch. Speaking from experience, and we all love that we do recover #stories, but that does not and sadly cannot apply to every sick person out there. So just like the impact chronic EDs can have on adult independence and still living at home, the fact that a grown adult with a long-running ED history has not been recently forced into hospital is, again, not a particularly rare, unusual, or necessarily abusive state of affairs. It does have to be kept in mind that even if a forced hospital admission was to occur, involuntary hospitalization does not involve the specialized ED treatment that such a person would desperately require. Emergency mental health detainments will, in general, just put that person in a general psych unit. Or if you're in a really, really bad condition because of an ED, it will just put you on a general hospital ward to be pumped full of fluids and tube fed, and, you know, whether you get any psychiatric treatment in that situation while they're trying to just stabilize you is unlikely. It's not a comfortable situation. It's not an ideal situation for many people. You know, if you can hold out and you can get an actual legitimate, helpful ED specialist hospitalization voluntarily, that is usually so much, you know, speaking from the people I've known who have been hospitalized multiple times, they will usually do everything they can to avoid being plopped on a general hospital ward when no one has the specialties to treat them and to comfort them and to deal with what they're going through. These things, emergency mental health detainments, they're really intended for crisis situations in order to stabilize someone on their meds, let them get some much needed sleep, or wait until a manic, paranoid, or psychotic episode has passed before releasing them back out into the community. To the best of my understanding, if you are forced hospitalized in the US, you would only end up on a specialist ED treatment ward if that were the personally arranged desire of the individual, who would have to find and negotiate an appropriate hospital stay, then go there voluntarily once their forced commitment was up. Because apart from all of the legal bureaucracies that you're caught up in if you are involuntarily hospitalized, I think one aspect is that ED programs kind of need to be able to eject you if you're non-compliant, because obviously if one patient is sneakily engaging in ED behaviours and they can't stop themselves, it's going to trigger everyone else. You can't have everyone stuck together and not be able to eject someone who's kind of causing problems within the hospital group. So what I'm trying to say is the realities of this just swoop in and save them forced hospitalization dream. It's all so much more complex and flawed and often a very traumatic process. Speaking as someone who has been on a generalized mental health ward, they are not pleasant places. It is not this fun girl interrupted vibe, dude. I felt so lucky that I was there voluntarily and could bail. I can't imagine the trauma of being put in a place like that and told you can't leave, we don't know when you're going to be able to leave, or you know you've got to stay here for X amount of days, no matter how rough it gets, you can't go anywhere. Anyone who has been on a general mental health ward, I think you will know that's scary. That is one of the scariest things, particularly if you're an ED person who has a disorder that is all about control, and control is being ripped away from you. Of course, that's going to be traumatic. So it's not something that many doctors seem willing to inflict on someone once it's established that they are a truly long-term, chronically ill adult ED patient. So once again, when it comes to this idea that an ED'd person's family will or should be in legal trouble if they haven't managed to force hospitalize them and then they pass away, I can't understand how this rumour has run so far without being checked by one very obvious reality regarding the person in question. It is common knowledge at this point that the internet has been phoning up their local police station for years in order to demand welfare checks and legal action regarding this person's visible sickness. Welfare checks have been carried out, and time again, as far as we, the internet strangers, are aware, no cause for action has yet been found. And I get that that is frustrating and upsetting for everyone who watches an ED'd person online and cares about their welfare. Like, we can see how sick they are. Why on earth isn't anyone stepping in? But it's not that simple. EDs are some of the most complex and difficult to treat mental illnesses on the planet. And I would like to say, thank God we now live in a world where human rights and bodily autonomy prevent us from flinging people into a sanatorium based on what someone else thinks best, with no regard to that person's personal wishes. Now, that is admittedly a very complex and flawed world where too many people are slipping through the cracks. And is this one of those cases? Maybe. Not receiving the help they desperately need in a timely manner. But compared to Victorian-era institutions filled with women who were deemed too political, too scholarly, too emotional, or family members who were just a little bit eccentric or neurodivergent, and all of them then end up rotting away, lobotomized even, behind bars for life based on that. I know I prefer the world with human rights and a little bit of personal freedom. So, regarding these welfare checks and the fact that nothing has ever been actioned based on them, whether you personally want to see sinister police corruption in the situation, or whether you just see the tragic complexities of an adult with a lifelong severe ED, I don't honestly get the thought process that would lead someone to the vast leap of logic regarding legal action in the event of this person's passing. Because here is what I see as the bottom line relating to this legal stuff. Who's to say if they are right or wrong, but so far the police have repeatedly performed welfare checks, and it appears they have found no actionable evidence of any abusive crime and no way to legally intervene. If this is the case while there is still a life at stake, is it therefore at all likely that this legal situation will completely reverse and an investigation be opened if and when that life has been lost and there is now nothing to be gained from legal intervention? And that is a hellishly clumsy sentence, so to put it more succinctly, the police have been to the house. They have interviewed the family, performed their welfare checks, and it seems they have decided that this is an unfortunate medical issue, not a legal matter. I do not see how or why this stance is liable to change if the ED'd person succumbs to their medical issues. And I strongly suspect that the police there are just as aware of the perilousness of the situation as the rest of the world, if not more so, because that, they have spoken to this person personally. And apart from that, they are not only worried about the vulnerable adult they're checking on, they know they are also under a global microscope regarding their conduct in this matter. And at this point, temptation to waffle off into my personal thoughts and theories and concerns about this person's current mindset needs reining in, because the only solid fact here is that we don't know any of the intimate details. We know nothing of what is truly going on to drive someone to such extremes. As I say, of the severely ED'd people I've known, some did have terrible home abuse in their backstories, but others had factors external to their home life, and school bullying was a large one. We do know that the person everyone's talking about was severely bullied at school, and this is something that I think particularly the older generation really sweep under the rug regarding anyone who's been bullied at school. It seems like, that just happens to everyone, just punch them in the nose or ignore them, it'll go away, it'll be fine. It is not seen yet, and I think probably in another generation, I think school bullying will be realised as something that can damage and impact you for life. If you just have a personality type that doesn't get over that stuff easily, like certainly speaking for myself, I don't think I will ever fully get over school bullying. There are plenty of situations that still, at the age of 40 trigger me and flash me back to school bullying. There are myriad potential causes for someone to have a severe ED. On top of this, I do feel the internet's intense black and white thinking about this particular individual is naive, to put it gently. Scary might be a better word. It seriously needs recognizing that an ED'd person is neither a pure saintly angel due to their frail appearance, nor are they likely to be an absolute Satan of a being through and through. The parasocial desire to lift people on high as a paragon of all things perfect who can do no wrong, or to damn them to the lowest reaches of hell for daring to be flawed in the public eye, or because they behave differently to how we parasocially imagined they would. It's an internet sickness that desperately needs eradication. An internet personality is, in essence, just a stranger you've crossed paths with a few times, nothing more. Your feelings, in my opinion at least, should rarely be extreme love or extreme hate when felt from such a distance. Famous people are still just people. There is nothing magical or special or unique or more perfect or less perfect about them, and notoriety and riches do not change that. Emaciation and even passing away do not change basic human nature. They are a real person with a real, if potentially flawed, family, and all of those people have feelings. In summary, if this person does lose their battle, the speculation about a documentary being made, I do suspect is accurate. Even if the family want nothing to do with a documentary being made, dude, I can just about guarantee you there are already 100 YouTubers editing up footage so that they can be the first one to surf the wave of morbid curiosity if that dark day does come. I mean, I imagine anyone who's an adult here knows this, but anyone who is in the public eye, news channels will have pre-prepared obituaries for everyone so that they can be right on the story if that story breaks. So it is guaranteed that there are a lot of gossip YouTubers who are already preparing and editing and filming obituaries for this person. And whether that is just doing their job or whether that is really dark, depends on your point of view. I find it kind of dark personally. So yeah, I do think the documentary rumours are likely to be true. But as I say, I don't think probably anyone close to them wants to come out and do a big tell-all. I just don't. Maybe I'm wrong, but I just don't. So I think there will be unofficial documentaries, which really is just a conflation of gossip and rumours and is no different to all the rumour mongering that's going on all over the internet now. It's no different. But regarding a legal investigation into the family, I personally really doubt that will happen unless some glaring new piece of evidence came to light. If you're watching this with an ED'd history like mine, I dare say you will already possess the bitter knowledge that it is incredibly rare for any of us to receive the care we need in a timely enough manner to nip this disorder in the bud. So I would say, if there's anyone in your life, if you're a parent or a sibling of someone who is displaying ED symptoms, I don't think you can really overreact in that situation. I think you need to get them to therapy as soon as possible and never say anything that dismisses or belittles what they're going through as, oh, it's just a phase, oh, you'll get over it, oh, so-and-so's way sicker than you. Don't say those things. They will be out to prove you wrong. I will show you how sick I can get. If you don't think this is real, I will prove it to you. That will be the mentality. You know, I think statistically speaking, the best outcomes for treatment with ED people are as soon as it begins. It's when people are young. That is when you have to pounce on them. The longer something has been running. It's another quite common quote to say that if you've been in an ED for like 7 years, it's quite possibly going to take you another 7 years to fully get out of it. That is how much it gets ingrained in your head. Although it does need saying here that the people watching, ourselves included, we are not the only ones with a frustrating lack of control in this awful situation. I cannot stand the gross oversimplification which now abounds that the person in question has never tried to get better, doesn't want it, and wants everything that's happening to them now. And the cruelty and backlash that bolts on from that when people believe that. Are you in her head? Have you been in her head for the past 15 years? Do you know every thought she's ever had? Everything she's ever tried? Every miserable, lonely night she's ever been through with this? You don't. You do not know. And it doesn't take much to guess that almost no one would want to go through that. Of all the things you could do with your life, would you, at the age of 15, go, that's where I want to be when I'm 30? I want my whole life to have been this repetitive, painful loop, waves and perpetual waves of hatred coming at me every day. No one wants that at 15, and no one continually wants it for 15 years. And I have known ED'd people who, by the end of their lives, honestly, I suspect they did want to be gone. Not to say that Eugenia does, just to say in the cases of my friends, I think by the end they did want it over. But having known them for a decade and a half prior to that ghastly ending, it was not the life they grew up dreaming of. They were so much more than that, and they wanted things, other lives, bigger dreams, travel and jobs and freedom and other cities. They wanted their life back so desperately, and time again they were thwarted by their own brain, until the very concept of free will dwindled into impossible obscurity, and they were left with the brutal realization that the only life they were ever going to have was this one, this life of suffering, an imprisonment within the walls of their own cruel and agonized skull. They tried, they fought, they persisted. But after enduring that suffering for year upon year, after watching everyone they got sick with overtake them, recover, leave them behind and go on to live real lives, yes, at that point, I do now believe that certain friends did just want it over. But that was not ever a free choice, nor was it an easy situation for them or for anyone involved in their ultimately losing battle. The whole situation around anyone with a severe ED is so impossibly complex, and yet, unfortunately, we dwell on an internet that has made brevity king. Comments are limited to a handful of characters, videos are deflated into reels and shorts, and all nuance is lost. You can either love or hate now, worship or condemn. And in those brief few characters, you can never even hope to capture the nuance that is vital to all discussion involving EDs. I know that ED'd people and addicts are intensely frustrating to know, watch, or deal with. But I do believe that every cruel word, and sadly many of the worried words too, that this person has had fired at them over the years have only been adding fuel to the fire of their self-destruction. I think everyone knows that by now, because no one is as bulletproof as you would have to be to sail undamaged through the online storms that have been put their way. Right now, I think anyone with half a brain cell can guess there is considerable turmoil and suffering behind the smile. I'd like to say that maybe it isn't too late, that this true rock bottom could still bounce a person back up, and stranger things have happened. But things are undoubtedly more perilous now than they have ever been for this individual. So just act accordingly, please, in what you say online and where you say it. I just don't think taking dark, morbid gossip and speculation to their literal comment threads, I don't think that's appropriate or helpful to anyone. And I don't think this. I'm trying not to be too harsh with my words here, but I don't think that anyone's speculative gum flapping is important enough that it has to be blurted out in that comment section so that it can devolve into a comment thread right in this person's view. You know, that literally they go to Instagram, one click and it's all right there. Yes, you can see things that are written about you on Reddit and other places like that. You're still in the room, but at least you have to seek it out. It's not literally right on your phone, a click away. You know, I just think bear that in mind. And with all of this said, much as our political views are an ocean apart, I do hope this person finds relief somehow, some way. Above all things, I really hope no one else dreams of following in this person's footsteps in terms of being so infamous for having an illness that is in no way glamorous, cute, or enjoyable behind the scenes. And the gutting thing is that I know there are like so many girls queuing up already to take this place. You know, you don't have to look far on any form of social media these days to see accounts by severely emaciated girls who are clearly modelling themselves on this person. And that is a very complex, depressing, tragic reality, let alone being so hated by all and sundry for being unable to beat your own illness. The isolation and misunderstanding alone is more than the average ED'd person has to endure in a lifetime. So if you find yourself fantasizing about anything like that ever, please tune out of following the whole situation for your own sanity, happiness and survival, and that of the people around you, because they're going to get dragged into the storm too. Think of them. If you can. Like, I know it's not as simple as that. It's just the same as people unaliving themselves. It's not as simple as, oh, it's selfish. Think of everyone around you. There is so much more nuance always to these things. But if you've gone deep down an ED-related rabbit hole over all of this, I would highly recommend putting down the device now and stepping away for a while. Ideally getting out into the world or being around people. Ultimately remember that yes, this person, even if they've been a big part of your life and you've watched them for years, they are not in your real life. You are not irrevocably bound to them in any way. You can go do your own thing, and that might be healthier. There is nothing to be gained from getting irrevocably tangled in the speculated tragedies of an internet human that neither of us have ever met and who probably doesn't know that either of us exist. But on the off chance, if that person does ever see this video, I hope you find peace in whatever form that means for you. And I hope I haven't said anything here that is hurtful or makes anything worse at this horrible, horrible time. Anyway, to everyone, take care of yourself. I'm going to shut up now, so thanks for listening. Over and out. Bye-bye.